Hello, this is Dave Sugarbaker, and today is the 23rd day of June, the second day of summer, and I have a comment or two to make about Juneteenth. But I'm going to start with Paul's letter to the Hebrews. Paul, before he was a Christian, was a Pharisee. And so he was well trained in Jewish culture and all the religious laws and the history. So today he's talking about history to the Hebrew Christians. That's who his letter is directed to. And he says this, "And what more should I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, obtained promises, shut the mouth of lions, quenched raging fire, escaped the edge of the sword, won strength out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies in flight. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely, and let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith." We all know the old adage that those who fail to learn from history are condemned to repeat it. These days, it seems like there's no excuse for failing to learn from history, and yet we do it all the time. Daniel Boone and 182 Kentucky militiamen were patrolling in central Kentucky when they were attacked by 50 loyalists and 300 indigenous warriors in what became known as the Battle of Blue Licks. It was August 19th, 1782. The Revolutionary War had officially ended 10 months earlier when Lord Cornwallis surrendered to George Washington's forces at Yorktown. But communication was so bad and the continued enmity was so great that the fighting continued at the western frontier. Daniel Boone lost a son in the untimely Battle of Blue Licks that day. It reminds me of Japanese soldiers in isolated Pacific Islands who never got word that the Second World War was over. Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation went into effect on January 1st of 1863, ending slavery in the South. But in fact, slavery was only ended in the few places in the South that had been taken over by Union forces at that time. The war between the states was ended on May 26th of 1865, 2 years and something later. Surely that must have been the end of slavery, but no, it really wasn't. Because a month after the end of the war, in June of that year, Union troops under General Granger entered Texas and found slavery still alive and well in Galveston. Granger ordered all slaves to be freed immediately, enforcing the law that had been on the books now for 2.5 years. The date was June 19th, 1865. According to historian Henry Louis Gates, Jr., news of Granger's order spread slowly to Texas's 250,000 enslaved people. Some plantation owners withheld the news until after the harvest, while others simply forced the newly emancipated to continue working. So freedom dawned slowly in some cases, but this was the beginning of the celebration of the end of slavery, June 19th, 1865, a month after the end of the Civil War. Juneteenth it came to be known as. It started as a Texas celebration, but within a few years, the great migration of blacks to cities in the North and the West began, and Juneteenth spread around the country. In 2021, Juneteenth was finally made a national holiday. It only took 150 years for the actual end of slavery in the United States to become a national landmark. Now, Southern Ohio, our area, was in the middle of the struggle to free the slaves. 3 Mile Creek was a natural landmark for runaway slaves to follow. It was a way to get away from the border with Kentucky and to go north toward greater security from recapture. There are stories of Morgan's Southern raiders moving through the area, disrupting things, burning railroad bridges, seeking provisions, and stealing horses. Locals, I understand, hid their horses in caves in the area to keep Morgan and his men from getting their hands on them. And West Union's First Presbyterian Church, which is now over 200 years old, became a hospital for wounded Union soldiers, and the support beams of the church still bear the carvings of bored, recuperating soldiers. So, since we've been surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, conductors on the Underground Railroad, those who shared resources with the wounded Union soldiers, locals denying sustenance to Morgan and his raiders, how do we run the race today? How do we make good trouble, as John Lewis would say? How do we celebrate this milestone that has been largely ignored for 150 years? Here are some things that I thought maybe we all could do, but which I didn't do. We could ask a friend perhaps what they did in observance of the end of slavery on June 19th. Or perhaps share what we have done in recognition of this important landmark. Didn't do much. Or we could dash off a check to an organization that's combating human trafficking today. Or maybe we offer a prayer of thanks that, except for the accident of birth as white people, we could be dealing with enslaved ancestors. I did none of those things. I acted like it was somebody else's commemoration, not mine. I checked my mailbox. I remember I checked my mailbox several times before it dawned on me that this was a federal holiday and the mailman was not going to be coming. What did Paul say to Hebrew Christians? We are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. People from the past may be looking over our shoulder, in a sense, to see if we have learned anything from history. Have we found better ways to handle our inherent human differences? What about slavery in our history? Slavery in our present? I finally had to ask myself, well, what would love look like in this situation? So what is love? Had to go back and take a look with the Apostle Paul in Corinthians again. Paul says, love is patience and kindness. Love doesn't participate in envy or boasting or arrogance or rudeness. Love never insists on its own way. It isn't irritable or resentful. It doesn't condone wrongdoing, but always, always delights in the truth. Love bears, believes, hopes, and endures all things. Love has no expiration date. It endures. So I'm happy for all those who celebrate Juneteenth. I'm happy for them and I'm happy with them. I want to hear the stories about others' ancestors who had to endure slavery. I know it will break my heart in one sense, but I want to empathize. And I want to be among those who say, never again to involuntary servitude of any sort. I don't want to hate the haters. I just want to do better than that. We have to forgive us all for our past. Well, now, we all have a past, and sometimes it just isn't pretty. We aren't defined or confined by our past. One version of Paul's definition of love includes this phrase: love keeps no score of wrongs. The present brings a fresh new opportunity to do better than we ever have before. We always have the opportunity to transcend who we were yesterday to become a new and improved version of ourselves today. So Paul says, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and every sin that clings so closely, and let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us. On your marks, get set. Thank you for your time and your attention to this. If you find value here, I hope you'll pass it along. And God bless you. I'll see you soon.